You want me to put that on my Tudor?
Harry's wife. Why she'll end up isolated. Hello, I'm hgTudor. Harry's wife will end up isolated. It's already happening. Why might this occur? The narcissist, of course, essentially needs other people. People are needed to validate the existence of the narcissist in terms of providing fuel. If you want to understand how important fuel is to us, I recommend that you read my book of that name. You'll find it in the Knowledge Vault or on Amazon. It's an excellent read and a foundation piece with regard to your understanding of narcissism. Thus, Harry's wife needs fuel from people. Their emotional response to what she does validates that she's important, that she exists, that she is meaningful. Because she is empty, her construct needs her to get character traits from other people. She needs the residual benefits that other people provide, the assistance in managing the facade by being part of it, the provision of money, which is hugely important to her, access to networks, etc. And of course, all of these people must be controlled. She needs people. Some narcissists operate within one particular strata, essentially all their lives. People come and go. For instance, friends might be put on the shelf, picked up, put down. Romantic relationships ebb and wane. As you know from my other videos, some narcissists of the nomadic variety get an intimate partner, disengage, find a new one, disengage, find a new one, always moving on to new grounds with regard to that intimate partner primary source. Others ping-pong between two. Others have an anchor, going off and having affairs but coming back to that long-suffering spouse, or girlfriend, or boyfriend, or partner. The narcissist also will have friends, colleagues, neighbours, family members around them. And for most narcissists, although there are changes in the composition of their fuel matrix, they largely operate within the same strata, meaning they operate with the same people in their workplace until such time as perhaps they change the workplace. They interact with their family members. They have a group of friends which they operate with, sometimes not seeing them for a while, sometimes falling out with them, drawing them back in again. But they operate within the same strata, both in terms of socioeconomic position, social standing, in terms of the friends that they interact with. And therefore, whilst they, of course, can disengage from people, most people are treated to the shelf dynamic. And most people tend to come into the narcissist's lives again, particularly those of a non-intimate variety, because either they're largely treated well by the narcissist because they form part of the facade and they're coterie members, or with lessers, they still get suckered back in because they feel sorry for the narcissist even when the narcissist has been unpleasant and harsh. For instance, family members. Yeah, I know that he has a temper on him, but he's my brother, so at the end of the day, I still need to be able to have a relationship with him. Sure, he can be an asshole, but we've been mates for 15 years, you know. He's my bro in that respect. I'm going to still back him up, and so forth. And therefore, these types of narcissists, whilst they have various members of their fuel matrix, and if you want to understand the composition of those, then you ought to read Pipelines, Understanding the Narcissist's Fuel Matrix, and also Understanding Changes to the Narcissist's Fuel Matrix, that while some people will come and go, there remains a core that's linked to that strata. The fact that the narcissist has the same job, lives in the same area, has the same socioeconomic position, has the same level of status, and therefore interacts with those same people. They can, of course, end up being ostracized if, for instance, the narcissist is in a small town and their repeated behaviors become seen by the majority that shun them. But that is quite unusual. Usually the narcissist is able to keep finding people to interact with, whilst at the same time remaining a core of individuals who tolerate the narcissist's behaviour or are essentially blind to it. With Harry's wife, she has this problem. Let us say that she started off in strata E, that she came from a reasonably well-off background, according to her father, less well-off according to her and her pity plays. Within that, she had a group of friends, she had family members. And then she started to climb out of that strata. She moved to Toronto and started to interact with the people on the scene there. That meant that she didn't have any need for the childhood friends. They were left behind, shelved, in some instances disengaged from. She still maintained involvement with her family. She will have needed them for certain aspects of the prime aims. But she made new friends in Toronto. And of course, whilst it's the case that you may not see the same group of friends as you go through life, you will still maintain contact with them to a degree and not jettison them in the way that Harry's wife does. She then, of course, moves on to another social group. And the people that she knew in Toronto, for instance, Corey Vitello, gets left behind, he's disengaged from. Connections that she made there are then jettisoned as she moves a little bit higher up into another strata. And then eventually, of course, she ensnares Ginger Bollocks. She moves to the United Kingdom, leaving behind all of those aspects of her life in Canada and the United States. She then has new family members, the royal family. She doesn't appear to have too many friends when she arrives, but she starts to look to make them in terms of being very friendly with Eugenie, who's also, of course, she's related to by marriage. She also had some friends in London that she would interact with. And then, of course, there is the move to Canada and then to California. The members of the family on both sides, apart from her mother, have essentially served a purpose. She has nothing to do with her father-in-law and stepmother-in-law, has nothing to do with her brother and sister-in-law. The extended family amongst the British royal family, they are put to one side, shelved. She's disengaged from her father and her two half-siblings. They don't serve any purpose for her because she has moved up to an elevated strata. The childhood friends have been jettisoned. The other friends that she made that served a purpose in the other stratas, they've been jettisoned. For instance, Lizzie Cundy is an example. And then she attempts to generate friendships amongst people like Oprah, Ellen DeGeneres, Jennifer Aniston, Reese Witherspoon, and other individuals besides. Some of those individuals don't want to know. Some gave her the time of day to begin with, but then recognised that she was problematic and have kept their distance largely from her. And the problem that Harry's wife has is this. As a consequence of the way that her narcissism has caused her to move through these stratas, she has jettisoned the people in each strata as she's moved upwards. As is often the case, many people say that you ought to keep people friends on the way up because you'll need them on the way down. Typical of a narcissist, she hasn't done so. She believes that she's better than those individuals, and her narcissism tells her that she doesn't need to have anything more to do with them. They've served their purpose. Those are now malfunctioning and defunct, obsolete television sets and toasters, if you will. Unfortunately for her, because of a lack of charisma and a lack of talent, the fact that she's indiscreet and that she's seen as grasping, the strata that she's arrived in, more or less at the top of the tree in terms of global infamy and getting up there in terms of wealth, means that the people that occupy this rarefied position aren't interested. They don't want to be associated with her. They don't want to be friends with her. She doesn't understand their world because she hasn't got there as a consequence of talent or diligent effort. She's got there as a consequence of marriage. In the way that she leached off her father, then Trevor Engelson, then Corey the chef, and then finally Prince Harry, it hasn't been done through her own endeavours. And accordingly, many do not like that. In a way, her position is a little bit similar to those individuals that come from poor backgrounds who win the lottery. Let's say, for example, somebody wins $40 million on the lottery. The issue they then have is they decide to give up work. But who are their friends? Well, their friends have to still work, and therefore During the day, they're kicking around with nothing to do because their friends are busy. In the evening, they want to hook up with their friends, but they've got family commitments, they're tired, they've got to do things around the house, etc. So they lose their friends, not because they chose to lose them, but they simply did because of the change in their status. Furthermore, when they go out with those friends, there's a problem. Some of those friends expect the newly minted lottery winner to pay for everything. Other friends are offended if they pay for everything. So there are situations they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. There then becomes a disconnect. Those friends talk about what they've been doing at work, etc., some of the struggles of life in terms of, say, the crisis of cost of living. That individual doesn't have that concern anymore. And therefore their areas of mutual interest start to fade. Instead, the newly minted individual looks to perhaps try and acquire some friends amongst the multimillionaires that he knows about. Now, of course, that lottery winner may not actually know of any, but even if he did and attempts to hobnob with them, they are often unwilling to accept this Johnny-come-lately because he hasn't come from an inherited established dynasty, he hasn't worked his way up through dint of sheer hard work and entrepreneurship, and he hasn't necessarily got the manners and grace and social standing, dependent on which country this is happening in. And therefore, those people who already occupy that strata of being well off and they are multimillionaires, etc., have a particular understanding of the way the world works because of being that, won't admit that individual. And therefore, that individual finds themselves isolated. They have nothing in common with the friends that they once had, and they've not been admitted because they had nothing in common with the people other than money, but those money people won't accept them. And therefore, they find themselves caught between two stools. Harry's wife finds herself in a similar situation. She has jettisoned her past to a large extent, and of course, even if she were minded to try and hoover them, many of them would be resistant, having seen the way that she's behaved and the way that she's, of course, treated them, that they won't want anything to do with her. She has alienated herself as a consequence of her conduct from members of her family on both sides, and those that occupy the highest strata don't want anything to do with her for the reasons that I've outlined previously. Now, of course, she won't be deprived of the fuel matrix. She has Harry. She has her mother. There's the children, if you believe that they exist. There will be flunkies, members of the coterie. There'll be a smattering of knee-suckers who perhaps see that they can get something out of her and they have their own agenda, so they basically kowtow to her. So she's not going to be starved of fuel. And indeed, of course, as we know with the repeated PR puff pieces, she's going to continue to pump those out and revel in the responses of the sugars that continue to support her and the negative fuel that comes, of course, from those that don't like her. But she'll become increasingly isolated because of the fact that as her narcissism has propelled her upwards through the social climbing that she has engaged in, she has not kept hold of the people that were her friends and her family members on the way up, and where she's found herself, although she expected that she'd be readily welcomed by those people already in that social strata, they haven't done so, and the few that have started to back away from her. And thus, as a consequence of the way that she has behaved, governed by her narcissism, Harry's wife will find herself increasingly isolated. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.